We have mentioned this plenty of times. The planet is a living thing and it's always going through changes. If you've seen our video about Pangaea, about 200 million years ago, our planet looked completely different. And instead of a whole lot of continents, we had one mega continent that had all the lands in one. But it's not like these changes have stopped in our lifetime. They are happening, but they're so goddamn slow that you don't notice it. In this video, we want to talk about a huge change that's happening on the planet that not many people know about. Africa. Do you see this massive continent in the middle? It's standing strong and it doesn't look like it's going to move. But we are not noticing that this continent is actually not doing so well, and it is literally breaking in half. A few years ago in Kenya, there was a crack scene that looked like the ground was collapsing. News about this kind of exploded, at least in terms of geology. Geologists from all over the world went to Kenya to see what is happening and what type of knowledge they can gain from this. After some time studying and seeing what is happening, they realized exactly what is happening. The crack happened in between two tectonic plates, between the West African Rift and the East African Rift. A rift is basically two plates that are separating from one another. And this several kilometer crack that you're seeing now in Kenya is the beginning of these two pieces separating from one another. So in a way, this is just the beginning. It's interesting because the East African plate is somewhat new compared to other tectonic plates. But scientists have known about it for a very long time, but they didn't know exactly when the separation will take place. But scientists and geologists believe that a new tectonic plate forming around the world is very much possible, so this is nothing out of the ordinary. The East African Rift is a massive plate because it begins around Somalia and it goes all the way down to South Africa, and that's about 3,000 kilometers. Scientists and geologists knew about this rift, but the reason the crack started to show a few years ago in Kenya because there was heavy rainfall, and that caused the dirt to get softer and softer and finally fall through, exposing the crack. Another sign that shows these two rifts separating from one another is that the volcanoes in this area started to get a lot more active. When a rift is forming, in simple terms, you have a giant cliff, and at the end of that cliff, that's where you'll finally reach molten material deep into the Earth's surface. So in a way, you could never truly let these rifts go back to each other. They're always going to separate. It might come back to each other after hundreds of millions of years, so it's not gonna happen anytime soon. The molten material between this rift is temporary, because the more and more it separates from one another, then it's gonna allow sea or ocean water to enter. And that's exactly when these two rifts or these two pieces of the continent truly separate from one another. When water starts flowing in between them, and the waterway gets bigger and bigger each day. It's interesting to know, around 138 million years ago, South America exactly separated from Africa just like this. It slowly separated, and it made the Atlantic Ocean bigger and bigger. Right now, this African rift is separating from each other at a rate of 2.5 to 5 centimeters, depending on the location, because some places are faster than the other. Usually when these tectonic plates and rifts are formed and they're separating or pushing on each other, that creates a whole lot of complications like earthquake. But the interesting thing is, in this part of Africa, even in Kenya, there is no sign of earthquake, which is unusual to say the least. Another thing that geologists keep saying is that humans have known about this separation thousands of years ago, because the crack has formed in Ethiopia a very long time ago. Scientists don't know exactly when it formed, but it was many thousands of years ago. So this is not like it's something new. But it's not like the continent of Africa is going to separate and you're gonna have two pieces. This is going to go for millions of years. We are just seeing the beginning of it. They believe that the true separation will happen between 5 to 10 million years. So it's not like you can just go buy some beach property in the middle of Kenya and think you're gonna make a lot of money. you're gonna have to wait millions of years to get your investment back. Scientists and geologists are a huge fan of this happening in their lifetime, because this is truly the first time they could watch a rift separate from one another live, something they could never do before. So by studying this, they can gain a lot of knowledge about how the earth works and how these tectonic plates and rifts move around. Maybe by studying this, they can even learn more about earthquakes and how volcanoes erupt and work. This is a massive tectonic plate, because when this separates, there's going to be 5 modern countries on top of it. But what they know is that this plate is going to move towards the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The problem is that the people that live near this crack, especially the populated areas, are going to face many problems, because in a way, underneath you, everything is getting empty and there's a chance you might fall through. So it's very dangerous to live in an area like this and have a peace of mind. Even though things like this takes millions of years, but it's still not stable to live near it. But geologists say it will only get worse, because right now we're not seeing many earthquakes and we're not seeing violent volcano eruptions. And there's a chance that these two will happen in the near future when this thing starts to act up. It's kind of like building a structure or a house on top of a fault line. There's always a chance that an earthquake will happen and that an entire building or house will collapse easily. Some people might say this is happening everywhere on Earth. You can find sinkholes everywhere. But that's not completely true, because what we're explaining to you is not a sinkhole. Sinkholes happen because of many different reasons. One of the main natural effects is that acid rain continues to flow and basically get into the soil underneath and empty it out. And in a way, a section of that soil gets emptied out and creates a soft spot, eventually creating a sinkhole where everything falls through. But this is mainly the natural way it happens. There are many things that a human can do to cause this. When humans have wells all across a city and take the underground water, they cause soft spots underneath the ground, maybe eventually creating a sinkhole. In other areas where the sewer lines aren't ran correctly and the sewer water and liquids get into the soil, this also happens too. It's interesting what happened in the year 2014 in the Kentucky Museum that had a lot of Corvettes in it. But this one took place because there was an ancient cave, and since the cave was pretty much an empty spot, it eventually led to a sinkhole like this happening, destroying a lot of precious Corvettes, and most of them were brand new. So a sinkhole and a rift is a completely different thing, but they might look the same on pictures.